Welcome, welcome. You know, I'm a massive Survivor fan. I think it's one of my favorite shows on the planet. It tests your intelligence, your physical ability, your social prowess. Me being a doctor, how about we analyze together all of the medical evacuations from Survivor? And we'll be looking at them in chronological order, starting from the first season number 2, that had a medical evacuation. In this season, which happened more than 20 years ago, Michael Skupin fell into the fire because he was breathing smoke from the fire and he began to feel dizzy and fainted on the fire.
You okay?
This caused him severe burns, especially on his hands. The biggest culprit from the smoke was carbon monoxide, which basically affects respiration. As you can imagine, this is a severe injury. It can easily get infected because basically it's an open wound and you're on Survivor. So he had to be medically evacuated. Next we move on to season 12 to Bruce Kanegai, which was suffering from digestive symptoms. I find it funny in this scene that one of the trimates asked him, who is, you can see he's in pain, he's suffering, can I sing you a song? Would that help? And you can see him mumbling no, but she proceeds anyway to sing to him. I find it so funny, like...
No.
She's trying to recomfort him and he's like, no, please don't sing, I'm dying, your singing will not save me. Most likely the symptoms were caused by intestinal blockage, so basically an obstruction inside your gut. Later was found that his colon and his bladder were blocked. Now you don't usually get intestinal blockage randomly just by eating weird or food that you don't necessarily like. You kind of have to have a certain predisposing condition like diverticuli or a certain type of adhesions inside the intestine that predispose you to blockages.
That his entire digestive system, his colon and his bladder were blocked.
Next we go on to season 14, Survivor Fiji, to Gary. Basically he's feeling kind of dizzy, also he has shortness of breath. The other trimates don't think too much of this and they just think that he's complaining too much.
I'm not so concerned about whether Gary stays in the game or not. Quite frankly, one less person, means greater odds.
But the medical team on Survivor, talking with Gary, decide together to get him out of the game because he's in no condition to continue on the island. The funny thing about this evac is that the other members of his tribe don't give a flying ass about him, except Dreams. Moving on, we go to season 16, Survivor Micronesia, where we have the first double evacuation in a season. First one was Jonathan Penner, who sustained a puncture wound to the knee in a reward challenge. Him being on an island, which of course doesn't have the most sanitary of conditions, it led to an infection of that wound, which eventually led to a knee abscess. Now of course you see a lot of skin infections throughout Survivor because a lot of dirt, not sanitary conditions, bugs, bites, stings. The problem is when the skin infection goes deeper, not just on the superficial skin level, and is close to a joint, because it can lead into the joint and can wreak havoc inside, and it's really hard to treat it with antibiotics because they can't properly reach the joint and in a sufficient concentration to actually kill the bacteria. So that's why many times the contestants are medically evacuated to receive proper care in a hospital.
I'm not quitting.
I can only recommend that you get treatment in hospital for the sake of your knee. It will just get worse.
What can you do? I know. Okay, let's go.
But indeed, if he would have stayed in the game, there would have been an increased chance of the infection affecting his knee and long-term destroying his knee, being needed a prosthetic for the knee, so it was the good call. Second person to be evac on the season is poor James. This guy is really unlucky. Seasons passed, he was voted out with 2 idols in his pocket. Now in a pretty end stage of the game, he gets out because of a skin infection near a joint in his finger. By the way, will be taken into account proper medical evacuations in which the medical team have deemed it necessary to get them out of the game. So James' knee injury in Survivor 20 Heroes vs Villains, also Stephanie's injury in the same season, the dislocated shoulder, will not be in the list. Then we move on to season 18, Survivor Tocantins, to Joe's medical evacuation. Again, guess the cause of the evac, infection near the knee. You're gonna see a recurrence of this theme along this video.
You still want to stay in the game?
I want to stay in the game.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I want y'all to tell me if you don't go home right now, you're gonna lose a leg.
Yeah.
Again, Joe doesn't want to go home. He thinks he can just walk it through, but the doctor right there decides that it's too dangerous and he's gonna be removed from the game. Funny thing about this evac is that all of the tribe mates don't really care about this evac and they just wanted to play.
No tribal tonight. That sucks. It's like we got a game plan. I'm ready for action. The Dragon Slayer has to wait another day to taste blood.
Next we move on to season 19, Survivor Samoa, in which we see again a double medical evacuation. The first one is of Mike, which accuses dizziness and trouble breathing. They keep trying to put him on his feet, but still the low blood pressure maintains, and basically there's nothing to be done, and they decide to remove him from the game. Again, might seem like an overreaction, but you can't really play Survivor if you can't freaking stand on your 2 feet and you keep fainting. The second one is even more terrifying, of Russel, which basically loses consciousness in the middle of the challenge.
Russel, get off the table!
Russel, get off! I want the ball to come
Russell!
to your ball. That we have to go down towards.
Medical team comes in, again they find that he has low blood pressure, the same as for Mike, but he has extremely low blood pressure, and even sitting it causes him to faint. So again, he's in no proper condition to continue the game, although they were trying to rehydrate him, nothing worked, so they decided to medically evac him from the game. Next we move on to season 24, Survivor One World, in which again we see a double medical evacuation. And we can see poor Courtney on the first challenge of the freaking season.
Go! Courtney falls hard on the hand.
The doctors go and examine her wrist, but unfortunately they can't guarantee that it's not broken and she needs to do an X-ray, because this is one of the most easiest and reliable ways to diagnose a fracture. And of course, because you can't randomly do an X-ray in the middle of the forest, she needs to be medically evac. Now this guy Colton is kind of infamous in the show because fans kind of know that many times he's lying, so even here people were thinking that he's lying and faking it just to receive attention or get out of the game prematurely. But after being removed from the game, he was diagnosed with a bacterial infection. And that's kind of what we were seeing in the episode. He was having digestive symptoms, pain in the abdomen. Funny thing is that in this episode, Colton actually had an immunity idol. And instead of bequeathing it or giving it to someone else, he just decided to keep it as a souvenir for home. Although he was allied with some chick that really got mad because Colton randomly decided to not.
Wouldn't be in this position. So you know what? Screw him.
It's fun to see the reaction of the tribe, which you can see they don't really care that much about Colton when finding out that he's leaving. Next we move on to season 26, Clement, in which Shamar, after a grain of sand got in his eye, was accusing of pain in this region and a swollen eye. Although we see that he really was in pain and wasn't able to do anything basically, his tribe mates doubted the severity of the injury and kind of mocked him.
Freaking guy doesn't want to be here.
When the medical team examined him, they found a foreign object in his eye and they decided to remove him from the game because if left untreated, this could have led to loss of sight. And again, in this season, we see absolutely no compassion from his tribe mates.
Still, he's disrespectful, lazy, and I'm just happy that he's gone.
Still from this season, we see the second medical evacuation, that of Eric, in which after one of the dumbest moves in Survivor seasons past, now we kind of see him uncomfortable and feeling kind of ill in the tribal council. At that moment in time, no one knew exactly why he was feeling so ill and so drowsy and with lack of energy. But later after the season, he talked in a video that although he was suffering from malnutrition and starvation and he was already underweight when starting the show, this was made even worse by an infection in his leg. The medical team from the show decided that he should take penicillin for the infection, but unfortunately for them and for Eric, he was allergic to penicillin.
I didn't know this until after everything, but I'm allergic to penicillin.
And right before that tribal council, when he took the penicillin, he started getting adverse reactions, of course being allergic, drowsiness, not feeling good.
When Brenda got her torch snuffed, I didn't realize she was getting her torch snuffed. She was just waving to everybody. And so I was like, oh, hi, Brenda, and I waved to Brenda.
He just woke up in the hospital the next morning and didn't even remember tribal council. Next we move on to one of the most horrible seasons for medical evacuations, in which we have 3 medical evacuations, the record out of all Survivor. Survivor season 32, Korang. The challenge went for far too long and many of the contestants were feeling ill because of the blistering heat. First we see Debbie that isn't doing that well, and then we move on to Cindy, which is puking and trembling because of the severe heat.
Caleb, water.
And then we see Caleb, who collapses on the floor, just exhausted. Then he has trouble breathing and the medical team runs to his help.
Can we take a look at Caleb too?
Heads up, guys, heads up. Move out, move out, move out.
We see Jeff being all flustered already with Debbie, with Sydney, and now with Caleb. We see the medical team trying to help him with his respiration, ventilating him. Also, they bring up packets of ice to cool him down. Basically, a heat stroke happens when the body's temperature reaches over 40 degrees. Of course, this is not a normal temperature in which the body functions, so that's why at this certain point all the cells start to go out of whack, and they can even die off, and of course they can affect all organs in your body. The high heat, because of affecting every cell in your body, can lead to multiple organ failure and finally to death. And as we see on the show, Caleb's temperature was 43 degrees Celsius, so a whole lot much higher than it would be normally. The medical team also tries to give Caleb IVs of cold solutions, trying to lower the total temperature of the body. This is one of the treatments of heat stroke. And one of the other treatments that we also see is to put cold ice packets on the body. I think out of all medical evacuations, this was most likely the closest to a potential death, and you can see Jeff in an interview relating his experience.
Our medical team ran in and we broke the fourth wall, and I was yelling things like, "We need ice, we need coolers, we need umbrellas in here." It was super scary, and he was out for about 20 minutes, and I was holding his head. He went, and his whole face got big again, like he was dying. And then later our doctor said, you know, you were panicking for the helicopter. He was not ready to travel. He wasn't going to make it. And then everything's fine, and he actually came back and played again. But that was the scariest moment.
Also in the season, a lot of people were getting skin infections. Yeah, what a surprise again. And unfortunately for Neil, a skin infection was close to his knee, a joint. Again, the medical team investigated his multiple staph infections. Yeah, one on the back, no problem. But indeed there was a problem with the infection close to his knee. Because again, on the same logic, it can lead to infection deep inside and go to the joint of the knee, and it can lead to a life without a knee joint, knee replacement, even death if the infection reaches the blood. And finally, the last evac from this season was of Joe, this amazing contestant, which he was 71 years of age, but was a powerhouse in the season. He wasn't bothered by the elements and by Survivor as a whole, but a freaking reward challenge in which he ate a lot of food, and especially a lot of meat, was the factor that got him out of the game.
Mr. Joe is loading up on beef and beef and beef, like it was bad. And I knew from my personal experience that Mr. Joe wasn't going to be in a good place later on.
Because after the feast he was feeling ill, he accused digestive problems. The medical team first tried to give him some drugs to relieve the pain, but after a day they saw that his condition worsened, so they decided to remove him from the game. And thus, this was the season with the most medical evacs, 3. After the first immunity challenge, in which they lost, on the road back at camp with a boat after hitting a big wave, Pat injured his back. But if you actually watched the season, you would have saw that most likely he would have been the one voted out, because he asserted himself as a leader of the tribe, being bossy. Finally, we move on to the last medical evac and the most recent, on season 42, of Jackson. It's one of the most peculiar medevacs because there was no concrete health risk, but more of a potential health risk along the way. Jackson revealed he was taking lithium to deal with the stress and also to help with anxiety and sleep. Then Jeff had a one-on-one with Jackson in which he noted that the medication has a reaction when one doesn't eat or sleep, or when one has physically demanding challenges, which are all of course part of Survivor. And because Jackson didn't reveal to the Survivor team that he was on lithium, and this can alter his participation in the show, and at the same time they didn't have any time to get another contestant on the show, thus the producers were kind of in a difficult situation. Should they risk keeping him for his health, or should they just go on? And because it can lead to severe reactions when you're stressed, no sleep, food challenges like Survivor, they decided to pull him out. So that's that. 17 medical evacs throughout the history of Survivor. Which one do you think was the most severe out of all of them? So as an advice, if you ever go on Survivor, never ever get skin infections, especially near joints. And also, if you're eating food or on a food reward challenge, never gorge yourself or eat food that you know doesn't sit too well with you, or you don't know the origin of that food, because you're gonna most likely get medically evac'd. So that's that. I'm a massive Survivor fan, so it was a blast to do this video. If you enjoyed this content, please leave a like, share, subscribe, because it helps growing the channel, and we'll see each other next time. Salut!